Tristan said that you should never allow a good crisis to go to waste, because a crisis is an opportunity to also do good reforms that in normal times people will never agree to, but in a crisis, you see, we have no chance.
Climate change tops the environmental agenda at present. We all know that every additional person will need to use some carbon energy, if only for firewood for cooking, and will therefore create more carbon dioxide. Though, of course, a rich person will produce vastly more than a poor one. Similarly, we can all see that every extra person is or will an extra victim of climate change, though the poor will undoubtedly suffer more than the rich.
These people are drinking beer.
This beer is made from fat wastewater.
Sweet.
It's actually really good.
Made from sewage.
Like I would expect of an alt beer or brown ale.
It's called New Brew from Singapore, and it's actually funded by the government there.
Over 2.5 billion people have no access to safe sanitation. We asked brilliant engineers to help us solve this problem. And one of those engineers actually has proposed a solution where the waste is valuable.
The Omni processor turns sewer sludge, which is kind of nasty, into clean drinking water, electricity, and ash that is pathogen-free.
I am very impressed with this solution we're seeing here. It generates electricity, it generates clean water.
It will grow to every corner of the earth that needs it because it makes money every day.
It's water.
Because as it is now, people in general don't seem to be very aware of the actual science and how severe this crisis actually is. So I just think we need to inform them and start treating this crisis like the existential emergency it is. Then I think people will understand and want to do something about it.
Sewer sludge.
I have no doubt that the fundamental source of all our problems, particularly our environmental problems, is population growth. I can't think of a single problem that wouldn't be easier to solve if there were less people.
What does population growth mean for climate change?
Sewer sludge.
It's water.
In the things we do every day, each of us are changing the world's climate. We cook meals, travel, build homes, heat them, turn on the lights when the sun goes down. The problem is that as there are more and more of us, we're changing the climate faster and faster. The cheapest and most effective way to curb climate change, most experts agree, is to get contraceptive services to the more than 220 million women around the world who want them.
Every extra person
but can't currently access them. Experts say the cost of doing that would be about $4 billion, a tiny fraction of the cost of damage from climate-linked storms, which now runs into hundreds of billions of dollars around the world each year. You might think that cutting population growth is most important in places like Africa, where birth rates are higher than anywhere else in the world. The average woman in Nigeria, for instance, still will have about 5 children in her lifetime. In the United States, the average is now just 2 children. But in fact, it's curbing population in rich, developed countries that has the biggest influence on climate change. When it comes to curbing climate change, rich families may need to begin acting a little more like Nigerians.
Sewer sludge.
Not by having bigger families, but by reducing the resources they use and the emissions they produce.
Get out there and eat some bugs.
These people are drinking beer. Made from sewage.
Sewer sludge. Just kind of nasty.
It's water.
Said that you should never allow a good crisis to go to waste, because a crisis is an opportunity to also do good reforms that in normal times people will never agree to, but in a crisis, you see, we have no chance.
These people who call us extra people, these people like Yuval Harari, who openly muse about, well, what are we going to do with all these extra people who we don't really need? David Attenborough, publicly discussing with Prince Philip, well, how can we get rid of all of these extra people? Not only do we not need them, we don't want them. They're a hindrance. But these people are labeling us, our offspring, our exhalations, environmental pollutants, environmental toxins. The very air we breathe is demonized. And we're told that we are terrible, we are awful, our toxic exhalations are destroying the planet. All the foods we eat, their toxic exhalations are also destroying the planet. And we need to listen to the philanthropists who tell us we shouldn't exist, who have labeled us environmental toxins. And we need to change our entire way of living in order to appease the planet. And don't worry, these people are going to direct us on exactly how we can do that. And their prescribed solutions to cure the problem of the changing weather includes eating bugs, drinking sewage sludge, and living in a total control smart city where your kibble rations will be given to you in return for good behavior in a social credit system. One of the most important documents for understanding the worldview of these people who have been using behaviorism, mass psychology, and mass media to push the idea of an ecological crisis requiring radical and swift human population reduction is the Jaffe Memo, from Frederick S. Jaffe to Bernard Berelson in 1969, when Frederick S. Jaffe was the vice president of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and Bernard Berelson was the head of the Population Council, a powerful NGO started in 1952 by John D. Rockefeller III. Before Bernard Berelson took the reins of the Rockefeller Population Council, it was run by Frederick Osborn, who was the former head of the American Eugenics Society, which had changed its name in 1973 to the Society for the Study of Social Biology. When they announced this, they said that, quote, "The change of name of the society does not coincide with any change of its interests or policies." The American Eugenics Society simply changed the name of their journal from the Eugenics Journal to Social Biology. This journal actually still exists today. It is now called Biodemography and Social Biology. So when the American Eugenics Society, which was staffed and funded by the same people as the Rockefeller Population Council, said that their name change didn't coincide with any policy change or change in interests, they were telling the truth. There was simply a shift in rhetoric. The compelling issue, the crisis that was used to justify the methodologies of the eugenics movement simply shifted from racial purity and racial hygiene to rhetoric of overpopulation. This overpopulation, population bomb rhetoric then morphed and combined with the current climate change and ecological crisis narrative.
I can't think of a single problem that wouldn't be easier to solve if there were less people.
And this is the context in which Frederick S. Jaffe, the vice president of Planned Parenthood, wrote this memorandum to Bernard Berelson, president of the Population Council. Bernard Berelson was a behaviorist. He believed that human beings were soulless automatons, meat puppets, manipulated and controlled by external stimulus. He was an expert in communications research. He was an expert in mass propaganda. Under the direction of Bernard Berelson, the Rockefeller Population Council worked closely with mass media companies such as Disney. And in 1969, they produced with Disney a cartoon espousing the benefits and necessity of decreasing human reproduction through family planning. Berelson championed the idea of fusing mass communication with the behavioral sciences for purposes of social engineering. The science of social control at the macro level would be coupled with a science of biological control at the individual, cellular, and even genetic level, for purposes of what the Rockefeller Foundation called human engineering. Bernard Berelson, the head of the Population Council, requested that Frederick S. Jaffe, the vice president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, write him the so-called Jaffe Memo in order to help him define, quote, legislative measures, administrative programs, and other governmental actions that are designed to alter population trends or that actually do alter them. The memo states that zero population growth is not just necessary, but is also inevitable. The memo states that realistic public policies intended to influence actual behavior are rarely adopted in the U.S. only for public relations reasons. Remember, these are people who believe that there are no moral reasons to do anything. These are pure behaviorists who believe that morality is simply a program. and that people's morality and sentiment can be and should be nudged using the behavioral sciences and mass media in order to influence their behavior at a macro scale. So this whole memo is all about decreasing human fertility. It is a full-on attack on human fertility. Jaffe tells Berelson that, quote, intervention to encourage lower fertility without the adoption of an explicit population policy, end quote, should be focused on. And the reason he gives for this is not because he thinks it would be immoral for the government to force sterility upon people. Right? He doesn't think it's bad for the government to indoctrinate people. But he says that education versus indoctrination is a better route due to the adverse political consequences. So basically, political backlash is the only thing that would keep you from having totalitarian measures that would decrease human population. Then Jaffe proceeds to provide a table of proposed measures to reduce fertility by universality or selectivity of impact in the US. Let's take a look at some of the methods discussed in this 1969 memo that was never intended for public eyes. Under the category of social constraints that would have universal impact, the first method listed is the restructuring of the family. Suggestions for this include the postponing or avoiding of marriage, as well as the alteration of the image of ideal family size. Next, we have the compulsory education of children. Then the memo encourages an increase in sexual activity and preferences and lifestyles that cannot result in human reproduction. Of course, compulsory education, a restructuring of the family, and the encouraging of alternative lifestyles all dovetail together. And this wasn't just an isolated incident. These very same measures were also proposed by the Commission on Population Growth and the American Future, the commission headed by John D. Rockefeller III and commissioned under President Nixon in 1969, where they suggested compulsory education about human sexuality for all children, as well as a normalization of the questioning of sexual mores and morality. The Rockefeller Commission on Population Growth, which was addressed to the President and Congress of the United States, couples this idea of a promotion of questioning of existing sexual mores with the so-called women's liberation movement and aims at bringing more women into the workplace, which is of course also one of the main recommendations in the Jaffe memo. Bernard Berelson was a part of this commission that attempted to make this public policy when they submitted a report to the President of the United States of America and to Congress in 1972, which is the same year that Paul Ehrlich and John P. Holdren published the textbook Ecoscience, Population, Resources, Environment. Ehrlich coined the term population bomb, a highly charged and psychologically suggestive propaganda term that would suggest that the human population is something we have to engage in warfare with. The book Ecoscience reads like a manual for warfare against the human population, as advocated in the Rockefeller Population Council, as well as the Jaffe Memo. Chapter 13 of this 1,000-page justification of the policies promoted by the Rockefeller Commission and the Jaffe Memo is on population policies and starts with a quote from Mao Zedong: "Of all things, people are the most precious." The book advocates a reduction of the rate of growth of the population or a stabilization of the rise of the population, otherwise known as a zero-rate growth, or even more preferable to them, a negative rate of growth in order to reduce the size of the population, which gives great context to the quote at the beginning of the chapter by Mao, who actually helped to reduce the human population by some 30 million people just from 1959 to 1961 by starvation. Mao was truly one of the greenest leaders of the 20th century. Just like the Jaffe Memo, the 1972 Ecoscience textbook suggests the promotion of the questioning of sexual mores, a restructuring of the family through the promotion of women leaving families and going into the workplace, so-called women's liberation, in order to change the traditional roles of women as wives and mothers. There are countless other examples of textbooks, white papers, policy recommendations written by global elites from the 1960s, 70s, and on. This is not just an isolated incident. The ideas put forth in Ecoscience are entrenched dogma among the elite still today. It was written by Paul Ehrlich and his wife Ann Ehrlich, as well as John P. Holdren, the White House science czar and top advisor under Barack Obama. Both the Jaffe Memo and Ecoscience recommend universal fertility control through additives to the water supply. Ehrlich and Holdren expand on the idea of involuntary fertility control presented in the Jaffe Memo and say that adding a sterilant to drinking water or staple foods is a suggestion. They go on to quote a physiologist from Tufts University School of Medicine who suggested that a sterilant could be developed that would have a very specific action. For example, preventing implantation of the fertilized ovum. He proposed that it be used to reduce fertility levels by adjustable amounts, anywhere from 5 to 75%, rather than to sterilize the whole population completely. In this way, fertility could be adjusted from time to time to meet a society's changing needs, and there would be no need to provide an antidote. Contraceptives would still be needed for couples who were highly motivated to have small families. Subfertile and functionally sterile couples who strongly desired children would be medically assisted. Another quote from the 1972 textbook, the development of a long-term sterilizing capsule that could be implanted under the skin and removed when pregnancy is desired opens up additional possibilities for coercive fertility control. The capsule could be implanted at puberty and might be removable with official permission for a limited number of births. Many of these fertility reduction measures have already been implemented at a mass scale. Sperm counts among Western men have halved in the last 40 years. Hormones, microplastics, and toxic additives in the water supply dramatically affect both male and female fertility. Masculinity, families, monogamy, real femininity are pathologized and demonized in mass media. Women are encouraged to pursue careers instead of families. Their most fertile years are spent often in promiscuity, which decreases the ability to pair bond later in life and ever have a successful long-term, healthy relationship. A huge swath of the male population have crippling pornography addictions and completely unrealistic expectations about relationships and sexuality. We need to step up and take accountability for our diets, our daily habits, our lifestyle, our spiritual state. The people that are programming this weaponized pop culture to teach us to self-destruct have warned us, have told us exactly what they're doing. And if we're aware of this, we can avoid the traps that are set for us. And through supporting local food producers, locally produced quality animal foods, tuning up our body and brain's functionality through proper supplementation, getting outside in the natural sunlight, forming real relationships with our friends and families, we can still be healthy, happy, and functional among all this madness and nonsense. Click the link in the description, get yourself a copy of our cookbook, learn to make nutrient-dense, from scratch animal foods, simple, straightforward meals to get your body running how it's supposed to run. And head over to choq.com, that's CHOQ.com, for the highest quality natural adaptogens and supplements to get your hormones, your body, and your brain functioning how they're designed to function. Use the coupon code BIG53LIFE, BIG53LIFE. Get 53% off all subscriptions for life. I use the daily every single day. I love the Shilajit as well as the Tongkat 100 extract. My wife also takes the Shilajit as well as the Tongkat and the ashwagandha extract every day. Take care of your health and your hormones while it's still legal. Hit the thumbs up, share the video with your friends and family, subscribe to the channel, get out there and live your life.